As sax players, it's natural for us to equate practice with time. In fact, the astonishing amounts of practice achieved by the greats like Charlie Parker and John Coltrane have become immortalized into the stuff of myth and legend in the saxophone world. But the simple, surprising fact is, focusing on practice time alone will not make you a better sax player. In fact, it's possible to practice for hours a day, for years on end, and still make very little to no progress on the saxophone. And that's because there are actually 5 key components to effective practice that you must do if you want to make progress every time you pick up your instrument. Now, I'm releasing this video to celebrate the launch of my brand new intermediate saxophone course called Supercharged Saxophone. It's built on the very practice framework that I lay out in this video. So, what are the 5 essential components of good sax practice? Let's find out. Without question, the first key component is playing long tones. This is as true as a beginner as it is for a professional. Long tones have 3 major benefits. Firstly, it's a mental reset for you. It gets you focused on the practice session ahead and allows you to filter out the distractions of the day. Essentially, it's a meditation on your saxophone tone. As you play your long tones, you should start to turn your attention inwards, focusing on your posture, on your breathing, feeling your diaphragm, and getting a warm, full, and stable tone. Secondly, it physically primes the instrument. Playing long tones and putting hot air through the instrument loosens the fibers of the reed, giving you a richer sound and a faster response. And as the body of the sax starts to warm up, it actually improves your saxophone intonation. And thirdly, long tones are your opportunity to check in with your embouchure and experiment with making small adjustments to instantly hear the effect on your sound. What happens if you use a little more mouthpiece in your mouth? What if you roll your lip out a bit more? What happens if you bring your jaw out slightly? By going through this process of experimentation, you'll start to get a picture of how you can improve your tone by breaking out of your old habits and starting to form new ones. You can even augment your long tone practice further by practicing with a tuner and making sure that you're playing right in the center of the pitch, remembering that the pitch control comes primarily from your jaw and your bottom lip. So you can see there is a lot to think about as you practice your long tones, and it's vital that you approach them as a mindful exercise rather than a mindless one. Now, the second key component to your practice session is tone development. Now, you're probably thinking, hang on, isn't that what we just did? But there are so many vital exercises to unlock the full range of expression on the saxophone that long tones is truly just the beginning. In this component, you can practice things like subtone, vibrato, overtones, altissimo, and so much more. These exercises expand your sonic palette, exploring what the saxophone is truly capable of and deepening your understanding of this instrument. Now, depending on how much time you have to practice, you could be looking at a couple different topics in this component. But for more casual players, I generally recommend just sticking to one at a time. For now, let's look at a simple vibrato exercise. Now, vibrato is achieved by bending the pitch of the note by controlling the pressure of the reed. If you're new to vibrato, you can practice this by just moving your jaw up and down very slightly to see what effect it has on the tone. As that starts to feel natural, the next hurdle to cross is being able to play that with a metronome. So you can set up a nice easy click, let's just say 60 BPM, and start by practicing the vibrato as eighth notes. Then you could try practicing the vibrato as triplets. Of course, you can then vary the tempo of the metronome, try different rhythmic groupings, or try different depths, shallow, deep, or somewhere in between. Once again, a fairly simple exercise quickly becomes a more challenging one as we start to adjust a few variables. Using vibrato effectively helps us to develop a sense of forward motion in our phrasing and brings a very human, vocal-like quality to our performance, especially if we're holding a static note. And by gaining fine control over our bottom lip and jaw like this, we're developing our ability to make subtle pitch changes on the fly, a key pillar of being able to play in tune. Now, the third key component to your practice is scales and arpeggios. Scales form the backbone of all music, and arpeggios outline the important chord tones of a scale, which, apart from being a great exercise in their own right, are vital to understanding the makeup of different chords that we'll encounter while improvising. But more on that later. Now, my personal recommendation is to concentrate on the major scales first. These are the scales that practically all other scales are based on. Now, as you start to learn more of your major scales, there'll be more sharps and flats to remember as well. The important thing here is to practice your scales enough so that you can move them out of the thinking part of your brain and into your muscle memory, where they can be recalled virtually instantaneously. For casual players, I recommend practicing 2 keys at a time and only moving on when you're really comfortable with those. It's also important to regularly revisit the scales and arpeggios you've already learnt to ensure that they stay under your fingers. Otherwise, trust me, they will eventually fade from memory. Hey guys, quick side note here, if you're enjoying this video and you're getting something out of it, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to download this PDF practice routine and watch my free masterclass where I give you even more great tips and exercises to fill out this routine, then just head to my website. The link is on screen, or you can follow it in the description down below. Okay, back to the video. So we're almost there. The 4th component of effective saxophone practice is technical exercises. These are exercises that focus primarily on the mechanics of the saxophone, like fingering speed and efficiency. But they could and should also include another key pillar of saxophone playing, which is articulation. Now, there are lots of good books out there that are filled to the brim with technical exercises, like the Rubank Method books, which are books that I worked through back in high school. But I also recognize that technical exercises rarely get sax players excited. So if that sounds like you, I would instead concentrate on short, focused exercises, or simply taking a large exercise and breaking it down into manageable chunks. With technical exercises, the most important element is your attention to detail. Otherwise, to be honest, there's no point even playing them. Getting the notes right is the first, most obvious step, but equally important is being able to play them in time with a metronome and playing the correct articulations or slur groupings. For Supercharged Saxophone, the course I mentioned at the start of this video, I wrote 94 2-bar exercises that focus on challenging fingering patterns and add detailed articulation that really challenges my students. Okay, so the final part of any good practice session is, of course, practicing songs. Now you may be sitting there thinking, wow, 5 practice components and only 20% of the practice time is actually spent learning songs. But in fact, over half my practice time I will spend on this songs portion. And that's because each of the other components have a smaller weighting. This is the ratio I generally stick to, about 5% on long tones, 10% each on tone development, scales, and technique exercises, and that leaves about 65%, or roughly 2/3 of your practice time on songs. So if you've got an hour to practice, it's going to basically break down like this. Now personally, I've found sticking to this ratio requires a lot of discipline. What you have to keep in mind is that all of this is a process. If you don't get through all of the technical exercises, for example, that will plant a seed in your brain that the next time you go to practice, you can get that little bit closer to finishing them. Now by far, the songs portion of your practice has the broadest scope. At its core, you're going to be learning melodies, the notes, the rhythms, dynamics, and articulations. If you're learning jazz, blues, and R&B, you may also be practicing your improvisation. Now here's where a lot of saxophone players get stuck. Just jamming with a backing track and noodling, don't get me wrong, it is fun and there can still be value in that, but that's not effective practice. Just like every other component, you need to practice improvisation with purpose. So have a specific harmonic or rhythmic concept in mind, or even just give yourself a challenge to start thinking more creatively. Some simple challenges you could try out are repeating the first phrase that you play in your solo, no matter what you play, even if you hate it, and see if you can develop that idea organically. Another idea would be starting your phrase with the last note that you played from the previous phrase. This helps you to weave a story into your saxophone playing and pick up from where you left off rather than playing disparate, unconnected phrases. Or you could try sticking to just one rhythmic grouping for the entire solo. So play all quarter notes, all eighth notes, all triplets, you get the idea. This will help you just to shake out of the familiar patterns that you're used to, so you can start to bring more creativity to your solos. Now, the songs portion of your practice can also include things like transcription, which really deserves its own video, and even active listening, listening to a performance and breaking it down into its individual parts. But now I want to ask you something. Do you have a practice framework that you're happy with? If the answer is no, I'm going to guess that your progress on the sax has been pretty slow lately. Now, at the start of the video, I mentioned that I'm celebrating the release of my latest course, Supercharged Saxophone. It's built on this practice framework that I've laid out in the video, but it also has all the great songs and techniques that you'll need to fill out this framework. The tracks have been recorded with a live studio band, and the course is perfect for you if you love jazz, blues and R&B and you feel like you're stuck in that dreaded intermediate trap. I've left a link for it down below so you can go and check it out and see if it can help you. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I've got some incredibly exciting content planned, trust me. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss out. Let me know what your practice routine looks like in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.